The Sam Elliott mystery is finally solved, and it isn't good. Sam Elliott stands as one of Hollywood's most instantly recognizable figures. The deep voice, the iconic mustache, the rugged presence that seems transported from another era of American masculinity. For millions of viewers, he embodies a certain ideal of the American West. Authentic, straightforward, and possessed of an integrity that feels increasingly rare in both Hollywood and the wider world. But behind this familiar image lies a career marked by frustration, rejection, and a recognition that came decades too late to deliver the starring roles his talent deserved. While audiences today celebrate Elliott as a beloved icon, the reality of his Hollywood journey reveals a far more complicated story. One of an actor who did everything right by traditional standards, yet found himself repeatedly passed over, typecast, and undervalued throughout much of his professional life. Sam Elliott is the quintessential example of an actor who Hollywood never knew what to do with, revealed a veteran casting director who worked on several projects featuring Elliott during the 1980s and 90s. He had this extraordinary presence and undeniable talent, but the industry kept trying to fit him into narrow boxes that never captured his full potential. It's one of Hollywood's great wastes of talent. What makes Elliott's story particularly poignant is the contrast between his current status as a celebrated character actor and the decades of struggle and disappointment that preceded it. The man, now hailed as a national treasure, spent the majority of his career fighting for roles worthy of his abilities, watching less talented contemporaries achieve the stardom that eluded him, and maintaining his dignity and professionalism despite repeated setbacks. People see Sam Elliott now, with all the accolades and fan appreciation, and assume it was always that way, noted a longtime colleague who has known Elliott since the 1970s. They don't realize he spent 40-plus years being told he was too Western, too masculine, too much of a throwback to an earlier era of leading men. Hollywood didn't want what Sam was selling until he was already in his 70s, and that knowledge leaves a mark, even on someone as grounded as Sam. Today, we explore the hidden reality behind Sam Elliott's journey to recognition, the disappointments, frustrations, and challenges that shaped not just his career, but his perspective on an industry that only embraced him fully when he was past the age when most actors find their greatest opportunities. It's a story that reveals as much about Hollywood's limitations as it does about Elliott's remarkable resilience in the face of an industry that failed to recognize what was right in front of them for decades. Sam Elliott's journey through Hollywood represents far more than just a delayed path to recognition. It illuminates fundamental truths about an industry that often prioritizes conformity over authenticity, marketability over talent, and flash over substance. What makes his story particularly compelling is the tension between the values Elliott personally embodies: consistency, integrity, craftsmanship, and the industry's frequent preference for trends, packaging, and immediate commercial appeal. Throughout his career, Elliott maintained a steadfast commitment to quality and authenticity that sometimes put him at odds with Hollywood's machinery, creating both professional challenges and a powerful foundation for his eventual late-career renaissance. His experience reflects the complex reality faced by actors who don't fit neatly into the industry's predetermined categories, those whose greatest strengths can become obstacles when they run counter to prevailing commercial trends or studio formulas. As we explore the specific chapters of Elliott's professional journey, we uncover not just the disappointments of an individual career, but broader insights into the sometimes arbitrary nature of success in an industry where extraordinary talent doesn't always receive the recognition it deserves until long after opportunities for leading roles have passed.
About the film and talking about our families and talking about our moms and
typecasting trap. The industry didn't want him for decades. From the moment Sam Elliott first appeared on screen in the late 1960s, he possessed qualities that should have made him an instant star: commanding physical presence, distinctive voice, and natural charisma that drew the camera's attention whether he was speaking or simply observing. Yet for decades, these same distinctive qualities that now define his iconic status became limitations in the eyes of an industry that couldn't see beyond its own narrow categories. Elliott was rejected over and over for being too Western, too deep-voiced, or too serious, explained veteran casting director Margaret Wilson, who witnessed Elliott's career trajectory from its early stages. These phrases became code words in casting sessions. What executives and producers were really saying was that he didn't fit their preconceived notion of what a leading man should be during those decades. someone who could be more easily packaged and marketed to the widest possible audience. This typecasting began early in Elliott's career and proved remarkably persistent. After his small but memorable appearance in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, Hollywood seemed capable of seeing him only as a cowboy or similarly rugged character, despite his desire and ability to play a much wider range of roles. He was often typecast and lost roles to flashier, younger actors with studio connections, noted film historian Robert Thompson. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, leading roles increasingly went to actors with a certain manufactured quality, men who projected a more contemporary, urban sensibility or possessed a more conventionally handsome appearance that worked well on movie posters. Elliott, with his naturalistic approach and distinctive look, became categorized as a character actor before he ever had the chance to establish himself as a lead. This categorization had profound implications for Elliott's career opportunities. Character actors typically receive less screen time, lower billing, reduced compensation, and fewer chances to carry major projects, regardless of their actual talent or screen presence. For Elliott, this meant watching actors with a fraction of his ability secure leading roles while he was relegated to supporting parts that rarely showcased his full capabilities. What made this situation particularly frustrating was that Elliott's limitations were entirely perceptual rather than actual. His performances consistently demonstrated remarkable range, emotional depth, and technical skill, qualities that should have made him a director's first choice rather than an afterthought. They wanted him to be a background prop, not a leading man, observed a director who worked with Elliott in the 1990s. The irony is that whenever Sam was on screen, even in a small role, audiences were drawn to him. He had that indefinable quality that separates stars from mere actors, an authentic presence that commands attention. But the decision makers couldn't see past their own formulas and demographics. The evidence of Elliott's underutilization appears throughout his filmography from the 1970s through the early 2000s. Films like Lifeguard, 1976, The Legacy, 1979, and Mask, 1985, hinted at what might have been if given leading roles consistently, but these opportunities remained scattered exceptions rather than the rule. Even when he delivered extraordinary performances, as in Mask, the industry failed to capitalize on his evident talents by offering similar showcase roles. Despite his talent, he didn't get major recognition until his 70s, noted Thompson, referring to Elliott's role in A Star is Born, 2018, which finally brought him an Academy Award nomination at age 74. This represents an extraordinary waste of potential. Think of all the leading roles he could have carried throughout the 1980s and 90s if the industry hadn't been so short-sighted. What makes Elliott's typecasting particularly ironic is how the very qualities that limited his opportunities for decades, his Western sensibility, deep voice, and serious demeanor, eventually became his most celebrated attributes. The same industry that rejected these characteristics for years now celebrates them as refreshingly authentic in an era of increasingly homogenized male performers. They wanted him to be a background prop, not a leading man. This observation captures the fundamental contradiction of Elliott's career. An actor with leading man qualities consistently treated as a supporting player. An extraordinary talent relegated to ordinary roles, because the industry lacked the vision to see beyond its self-imposed categories and recognize what audiences instinctively responded to whenever Elliott appeared on screen.
That I've made there, that's what I've found after almost 49 years in the business.
Delayed recognition, the fame came too late, and it hurt. The peculiar cruelty of Hollywood's treatment of Sam Elliott lies not just in the decades of typecasting and limited opportunities, but in the timing of his eventual recognition, arriving so late in his career that much of his potential had already gone unfulfilled. After more than 40 years of consistently excellent performances in predominantly supporting roles, Elliott finally began receiving the acclaim and opportunities his talent had always deserved, but only after he had passed the age when leading roles typically become scarce even for established stars. For 40-plus years, he played second fiddle, despite being more talented than most of the leads, noted film critic Michael Barnes, who has followed Elliott's career since the 1980s. He would elevate whatever project he was in, often becoming the most memorable aspect of films where he had limited screen time. Yet he watched actors with a fraction of his ability become household names and command multi-million-dollar salaries while he remained in the industry's second tier. This pattern created a unique form of professional frustration, the awareness that his contributions were valued, but not enough to elevate his status or expand his opportunities. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Elliott delivered standout performances in films like Mask, Roadhouse, and Tombstone, yet continued to be relegated primarily to supporting roles rather than being offered projects built around his considerable talents. By the time he was finally Oscar-nominated in 2019, Elliott was publicly bitter, Barnes continued, referring to Elliott's supporting actor nomination for A Star is Born at age 74. His response, "It's about fucking time," wasn't just a moment of candor. It was the natural reaction of someone who had spent decades watching less deserving performers receive the recognition and opportunities that had eluded him despite his superior work. The late career renaissance that began for Elliott around 2015 with projects like Grandma, The Hero, and culminated in A Star is Born represented a bittersweet vindication. While it finally brought him the acclaim and high-profile roles he had always deserved, it also highlighted how much of his prime had been wasted on roles beneath his capabilities. He gave Hollywood his whole life, and it ignored him until he was old enough to be someone's grandfather, observed casting director Wilson. Think of the leading roles he could have played in his 40s and 50s if the industry had recognized what they had. Instead, those decades, typically the prime of a leading man's career, were largely spent playing supporting characters or leads in projects with limited distribution and impact. What makes this delayed recognition particularly poignant is that Elliott himself was clearly aware of his underutilization. Unlike some actors who maintain diplomatic silence about industry frustrations, Elliott has occasionally allowed glimpses of his disappointment to show through his characteristically reserved public persona. In a 2015 interview, when asked about his career trajectory, Elliott responded with understated but unmistakable frustration. "I've spent my entire career playing characters that support the leads. That's been my lot. Is that frustrating? Sure, but you play the hand you're dealt." This characteristically straightforward assessment reveals an actor who recognized his situation clearly but chose to maintain his professionalism despite legitimate grievances. The emotional impact of this delayed recognition becomes evident in Elliott's response to his Oscar nomination, a moment that should have represented pure celebration, but instead carried the weight of decades of being overlooked. His unfiltered reaction, "It's about fucking time," speaks to the accumulated frustration of watching award seasons come and go for over 40 years without the recognition his work deserved. He gave Hollywood his whole life, and it ignored him until he was old enough to be someone's grandfather. This observation captures the essential injustice of Elliott's career trajectory. Not that recognition never came, but that it arrived so late that many of his prime opportunities had already passed. The leading roles he might have carried throughout the 1980s and 90s, the star vehicles that could have been built around his distinctive presence, the chances to define characters rather than support others' stories, all these possibilities remained largely unrealized until age had already narrowed the range of roles available to him. The bittersweet quality of Elliott's late career acclaim reflects a broader truth about Hollywood's sometimes arbitrary distribution of opportunities. That talent alone rarely determines who receives the chance to fully realize their potential, and that the industry's recognition often comes too late to deliver the career an actor truly deserved.
Any of you some bitches calls me Grandpa, I'll kill you.
Principled isolation. He watched his peers self-destruct and held the rage in. While many of his contemporaries embraced the excesses of Hollywood, particularly during the notoriously indulgent 1970s and 80s, Sam Elliott maintained a level of personal and professional discipline that stood in stark contrast to the industry's prevailing culture. This principled approach to his life and career, while admirable in retrospect, often placed him at odds with the very industry in which he sought success, creating a paradoxical situation where his stability became a liability rather than an asset. Sam avoided the drug-fueled chaos of the 70s and 80s, noted entertainment journalist Thomas Henderson, who has covered Hollywood since the late 1970s. This was an era when cocaine was practically a professional requirement in certain Hollywood circles, when deals were made at parties and relationships formed in environments that centered around excess. Elliott's choice to remain apart from this scene was principled, but had practical consequences for his career opportunities. Unlike many of his peers who built their networks and advanced their careers through the social side of Hollywood, Elliott maintained a more reserved approach. He married actress Catherine Ross in 1984 and established a life deliberately distanced from the industry's social whirlwind, prioritizing stability and consistency over the connections that might have advanced his career more rapidly. He kept his marriage intact, stayed sober, stayed disciplined, Henderson continued. While this created a solid foundation for his life, it meant he wasn't part of the inner circles where many opportunities originated. In an industry built as much on relationships as talent, Elliott's principled distance created professional limitations alongside personal benefits. What makes this situation particularly ironic is that the very stability Elliott maintained should logically have made him more attractive to studios and producers, a reliable professional who wouldn't create the delays, insurance issues, or public relations problems that plagued productions featuring less disciplined performers. Yet the opposite often proved true, with more volatile personalities receiving greater opportunities despite their problematic behavior. And yet Hollywood embraced chaos and punished stability, observed a producer who worked with Elliott in the 1990s. The sad reality is that bad behavior created publicity, and publicity, even negative, kept certain actors in the conversation. Meanwhile, someone like Sam, who simply showed up prepared and delivered consistently excellent work without drama, could be taken for granted or overlooked entirely when exciting new projects were being cast. This dynamic created a particular kind of frustration for Elliott, watching peers with less discipline and often less talent advance their careers through behavior he had consciously rejected. According to those who knew him during this period, he maintained his characteristic reserve about these observations, rarely voicing the resentment he must have felt as less professional actors received the opportunities his talent deserved. He did everything right and still got left behind, noted the producer. This reality required a certain emotional fortitude. To maintain your principles when they seem to be costing rather than benefiting your career, to watch less disciplined colleagues receive rewards for behavior you've chosen to reject. Sam carried that knowledge with remarkable grace, but it had to create internal conflict. The tension between Elliott's personal choices and professional ambitions reflects a broader contradiction within Hollywood itself, an industry that simultaneously demands extraordinary discipline and craft, while often rewarding behavior that undermines that same discipline. For actors like Elliott, navigating this contradiction required compartmentalizing disappointment while maintaining the very professionalism that sometimes limited their opportunities. He did everything right and still got left behind. This observation captures the essential paradox of Elliott's middle career, that his greatest strengths as a person sometimes became limitations as a professional in an industry where excess often generated attention, and attention translated to opportunity. The anger such a situation would naturally produce remained largely internalized, emerging only occasionally in unguarded moments or brief comments that hinted at a deeper frustration with an industry that failed to value what should have been his greatest assets: consistency, professionalism, and authentic craft unclouded by destructive behavior.
Yeah,
How come you're only swapping with 2 rifles?
because I only killed 2 of them. I wounded a third, but he made it to cover.
Industry retaliation. He got blacklisted, quietly. By the 1990s, Sam Elliott had established himself as a reliable character actor with occasional leading roles, primarily in westerns and television projects. While never achieving the stardom his talents deserved, he had built a respectable career through consistency, professionalism, and an unwavering commitment to quality. This dedication to his craft, however, eventually placed him in direct conflict with industry practices that prioritize commercial considerations over artistic integrity, a conflict that reportedly led to a period of professional exile that further limited his already constrained opportunities. In the 90s, after refusing to do certain TV projects and turning down bad scripts, Sam was unofficially frozen out, explained an agent who worked with several Western-oriented actors during this period. This wasn't a formal blacklisting like in the McCarthy era, nothing so explicit or politically motivated. It was the more subtle modern version, fewer calls, projects that would have been perfect fits going to other actors, a quiet understanding among certain producers that Elliott was difficult. This unofficial blacklisting reportedly originated from Elliott's unwillingness to compromise on material he considered beneath his standards or at odds with the authentic Western sensibility he had worked to maintain throughout his career. As networks and studios increasingly pushed for modernized, commercialized versions of Western stories that Elliott found inauthentic or exploitative, his resistance created friction with decision-makers accustomed to actor compliance. Producers labeled him difficult and too proud, noted the agent. In Hollywood parlance, difficult often simply means an actor who advocates for quality or authenticity rather than accepting whatever is offered. Elliott's crime wasn't unprofessional behavior, it was maintaining professional standards that some producers found inconvenient to their commercial goals. The consequences of this industry pushback manifested in a noticeable contraction of Elliott's career opportunities during a period when he should have been receiving his most substantial roles. After delivering acclaimed performances in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Elliott found his options increasingly limited to smaller roles, voice work, and cameos that underutilized his considerable talents. For nearly a decade, he was forced into small roles, voice work, and cameos, observed film historian Robert Thompson. Look at Elliott's filmography from roughly 1995 to 2005, and you'll see a puzzling underutilization of an actor in his prime. The scattered nature of his work during this period, a voice role here, a small part there, suggests not an actor turning down opportunities, but one being systematically sidelined. What makes this period particularly significant in understanding Elliott's career is how it illuminates the power dynamics of Hollywood, the way the industry can effectively discipline talent that doesn't conform to its expectations, regardless of their actual professional behavior or the quality of their work. For Elliott, maintaining his artistic integrity carried a tangible professional cost at a time when he should have been receiving his most substantial opportunities. They couldn't control him, so they stopped calling, noted the agent. The sad irony is that the very qualities that now make Elliott so celebrated, his authenticity, his unwillingness to compromise, his commitment to honoring the Western tradition, were precisely what limited his opportunities during this period. The industry wanted malleability. Elliott offered integrity. This period of professional exile only began to ease in the mid-2000s. As a new generation of filmmakers less connected to the producers Elliott had alienated began to recognize his unique qualities and distinctive screen presence. Projects like Thank You for Smoking, 2005, and The Golden Compass, 2007, began to utilize Elliott more effectively, though still primarily in supporting roles rather than leads. The full rehabilitation of Elliott's industry standing wouldn't occur until the 2010s, when the very authenticity that had once made him difficult became his most marketable quality in an industry increasingly criticized for its artificiality and formula-driven approach. As audiences and some filmmakers began seeking more genuine alternatives to Hollywood's standard offerings, Elliott's unwavering commitment to his principles transformed from liability to asset. They couldn't control him, so they stopped calling. This observation captures the essential dynamic of Elliott's difficult period, the way the industry's machinery can effectively sideline even extraordinary talent when it refuses to conform to expected behaviors or accept compromised material. The resilience Elliott demonstrated during this challenging phase, continuing to deliver excellence even in limited opportunities, while maintaining the principles that had restricted those opportunities, speaks to a strength of character that would eventually be vindicated as the industry gradually recognized what it had been squandering for decades.
Yellowstone is all over this. We're tainted by Yellowstone, which on some level I can't stand, because I think 1883 stands alone.
Public misstep, the Yellowstone drama he finally spoke about. After decades of maintaining a characteristically reserved public persona, rarely engaging in controversy and keeping his criticisms of the industry largely private, Sam Elliott found himself at the center of an unexpected media firestorm in 2022. His candid comments about Jane Campion's acclaimed Western The Power of the Dog generated intense backlash, creating the kind of public relations crisis Elliott had successfully avoided throughout his long career and highlighting the challenges faced by an actor whose authentic Western sensibility sometimes places him at odds with contemporary interpretations of the genre he knows so intimately. In 2022, Elliott blasted the film The Power of the Dog, calling it a piece of essayist Western, noted entertainment journalist Rebecca Santos. During an interview on the WTF with Mark Maron podcast, Elliott questioned the New Zealand director's credentials to make a Western set in Montana, criticized the film's themes and portrayal of cowboys, and used language that many perceived as homophobic regarding the film's exploration of repressed sexuality. Elliott's comments came during a broader discussion about Westerns, a genre he has embodied throughout his career and clearly feels a personal connection to through both his work and his own Western lifestyle. His criticism specifically addressed what he perceived as inauthenticity in Campion's approach to the material, questioning her understanding of the historical and cultural realities of the American West. The backlash was massive. Some said it was misogynistic, homophobic, and embarrassing, Santos continued. Social media erupted with criticism. Major news outlets covered the controversy, and several people involved with the film, including director Jane Campion and star Benedict Cumberbatch, publicly responded to Elliott's comments. For an actor who had largely avoided controversy throughout his career, it represented an unprecedented level of negative attention. What made this incident particularly significant in understanding Elliott's relationship with Hollywood is how it highlighted the tension between his authentic, traditional understanding of Western culture and the industry's evolving approach to the genre, one that increasingly incorporates contemporary sensibilities and revisionist perspectives on Western mythology. After decades of quietly accepting the industry's marginalization of the traditional Western values he embodied, Elliott had finally voiced his frustration in a public forum, with consequences he likely never anticipated. He finally spoke his mind, and Hollywood slapped him for it, observed film critic Michael Barnes. The irony is that Elliott was essentially criticizing the film for the same reason many people loved it, because it deliberately subverted traditional Western tropes and examined aspects of frontier masculinity that conventional Westerns often ignore. It was a collision between Elliott's lived experience of Western culture and a more theoretical, critical approach to that same culture. Elliott's comments and the resulting backlash created a complex situation that defies simple characterization. While many criticized the actor's tone and choice of words, particularly those that could be interpreted as homophobic, others defended his right to critique a film's authenticity based on his lifetime of experience with the culture it portrayed. The controversy highlighted the broader tensions between traditional and progressive interpretations of American history and culture, with Elliott unexpectedly becoming a focal point for these larger conversations. Elliott later apologized, but the damage was done, noted Santos. He issued a public apology during a promotional panel for 1883, expressing remorse for hurting people with his comments and acknowledging that art is subjective. It was a gracious retraction, but the incident had already affected public perception of an actor who had previously been almost universally respected across political and cultural divides. For Elliott, the controversy represented a painful lesson in the changed media environment, one where casual comments can quickly become global news, and where perspectives formed in earlier eras may clash with contemporary sensibilities. After navigating Hollywood for over 50 years with remarkable discretion and diplomacy, Elliott had discovered the harsh consequences of unguarded candor in the social media age. He finally spoke his mind, and Hollywood slapped him for it. This observation captures both the catalyst and consequence of Elliott's rare public misstep, a moment when the frustration accumulated through decades of watching his beloved Western genre, transformed by filmmakers with different sensibilities, finally found public expression, only to generate precisely the kind of controversy Elliott had successfully avoided throughout his long career. The incident revealed both the depth of Elliott's connection to Western culture and the challenges of maintaining that connection in an industry increasingly distanced from the traditional values and perspectives he embodies.